Good morning to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with an off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. Not talking about hurricanes, not going to talk about anything related to the tropics in this update, but it is the off-season, and as you know, if you have followed my off-season Outlook videos over the past several years, during the winter months when it's not hurricane season, not only do we talk about at least once per week some of the things that might shape the upcoming hurricane season, but we're always on the lookout for a big weather event, a big winter storm, usually an East Coast storm. Since I live on the East Coast, I'm down in Wilmington, North Carolina, and these big winter storms, blizzards, coastal storms, anywhere from the Outer Banks of North Carolina up to the Northeast, New England, Cape Cod, etc. I'm interested in those. Those are similar in terms of impacts to hurricanes, and they have given me a chance to test equipment over the past few years and basically just kind of stay in the game, so to speak, even though it's not hurricane season. And we have one of those situations unfolding over the next few days, and it's really time to talk about it here. This is the latest infographic and briefing package from the National Weather Service out of Boston, that a high impact, and that's what it's all about here, this impact, very big impact storm, long duration coastal storm. The greatest concern here, and this is where it really piques my interest, the greatest concern, moderate to perhaps major coastal flooding with some property damage across the eastern Massachusetts coastline Friday into Saturday. Heavy rain and flooding, damaging wind gusts, and even wet snow. So in this situation, it's not the blizzard aspect. It's not the big, oh, look at all that snow coming. There will be snow on the west side of this storm, but this is not an I-95 corridor, Boston, New York City, Philly, big-time snow event. This is a coastal storm with the biggest impacts being felt along the coast, okay? So don't focus on the snow so much. I'm not. We'll talk about it a little bit, but the main thing here is this massive storm that is going to pummel eastern Massachusetts, especially with potentially damaging coastal storm surge. You do get storm surge from that onshore flow, the long duration fetch, and large waves up to 30 feet in some cases just offshore. And we're still, about 60 hours out from this happening, and already these effects are starting to become pretty ominous. So here's the latest infographic in the briefing package from the Weather Service up in Boston. Coastal flood watch here, all of eastern Massachusetts, including the Cape and the islands, and we'll read about what that means in just a minute, some of the details. Moderate coastal flooding and significant beach erosion, almost a sure bet. And the potential is there for major coastal flooding. This could rival some of the big nor'easters and coastal storms in Massachusetts history, and I'm not being hyperbolic about that, where, oh, that's just hype. No, it's true. Some of the model guidance is suggesting this could exceed, especially considering we're going into a full moon period, high astronomical tides. This needs to be taken very, very seriously, and we'll talk about some of the areas that could be impacted in just a moment. So here's what they're looking at. Coastal flooding, marine interest. They had a statement out, a marine weather statement. All vessels, large or small, all of them, the fishing fleets, you name it, don't go out. They just said, stay in port, period. That's serious. I mean, you see something like that and you say, wow, they're not talking about just small craft or whatever. They want all vessels remaining in port for this. 25 to 35 foot seas across the eastern waters possible with 55 knot winds. So we're talking about dangerous to life-threatening conditions for mariners, okay? So this is not just people on land at the immediate coastline. This is for mariners as well. Anybody out there, the stories over the centuries of what the coastal waters have done, loss of life. They made a movie about it called The Perfect Storm based on a book. This is very serious, all right? Heavy rain, freshwater flooding is possible, and the rain may change to wet snow in some places, and that wet, heavy snow can cause branches to break, trees to come down, and possible for power outages. So follow the Weather Service. out of Boston on Twitter, on social media, and you can get a look at these different slides. And they're looking at the life-threatening conditions here for mariners is in the extreme over here. Let me highlight it in a different color. And then the storm surge is significant, not quite to the extreme. And then wind is all elevated and down to freshwater flooding, as well as the heavy wet snow. I fully expect that this part here, hazard number 2, the coastal flooding, that this will get moved over to extreme at some point. I really do. And that's dangerous. We're talking life-threatening conditions here possible. This needs to be taken very, very seriously. All right, so their confidence is growing, and we're still, like I said, more than 48 hours out, so this is going to change, and you need to be paying attention to this if you are in the Northeast. This is not just eastern Massachusetts, but Long Island, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, Connecticut, Rhode Island, anywhere in the Northeast, all the way down into the mid-Atlantic states in terms of the wind impacts. But this area, eastern Massachusetts, is where the likelihood of the greatest impacts will be felt overall. All right, but this is going to be a widespread event encompassing a huge part of the east coast of the United States, from roughly the Outer Banks north of North Carolina all the way up to the Georges Bank area, the Gulf of Maine. You guys up there, really please take this seriously, okay? So National Weather Service, Boston, this is the current setup for watches. Coastal Flood Watch right now, there's the marine weather statement. And you can get all this by going to weather.gov, type in Boston, type in your zip code, whatever, and you can pull this information up and read it yourself. Very, very helpful, and it's written by people, not just computers or whatever. It's not just a computer model that's turned into a forecast, okay? This is written by men and women who work for the National Weather Service. So looking at just sort of the forecast discussion here, long-term Thursday through Tuesday, so several days here. We're really interested in Friday and Saturday. Major coastal flooding, as I talked about, strong to damaging winds, heavy rain, and maybe even some wet snow, but this again is not going to be a big-time snow event for the coastal areas that you're used to seeing. Farther inland, yes, and that can be addressed. Read about that at weather.gov. This, to me, the coastal part in terms of the threat to life and property is the biggest issue. So I want to scroll down here. They talk about the coastal flooding, that all of the zero-Z guidance that came in last night, the overnight models, indicating that the storm is farther north, right there, and stronger. All right? So that means, and this is still early, so it's probably going to get even stronger from there. And we're looking at it anywhere early on. Indications are 1.5 to 2.5 feet to 3 feet of surge. That's additional water on top of the high tide that's already going to be higher because of the full moon, the astronomical tide cycle. An additional 3 feet, maybe even more than that. And then you're going to have battering waves on top of that. All right, so this paints a very ugly picture for the coastal areas. If we look at the Coastal Flood Watch, click on that. It gives you information about where it's in effect. And then you scroll down here and it gives you some of the early thoughts as to the impacts for specific areas, from Newburyport to Gloucester Harbor, down to Boston Harbor, Revere, Situate, which is, I'm headed there. I'll talk about that in a minute. Sandwich, Dennis, a little less down in that region along the inner Cape and the outer Cape, and Provincetown Harbor. This, again, is more of an eastern mainland Massachusetts event than out on the Cape. And if you look here, look at Chatham, along the east coast of Chatham as an example. On the outer Cape, only minor flooding is expected. So this is really more of an inland, not inland, it's a coastal, away from the Cape event right in here. This is where I'm most worried about, not so much out here. Very strong winds out there for sure, very heavy rain, but the surge and the battering waves and the damage to property and the potential for people to be harmed more along the main coastal region instead of the inner Cape or the outer Cape. That being said, I will be leaving Wilmington, North Carolina in the next few hours to drive up to the region. I have always wanted to place one or more of our unmanned camera systems in the Scituate area, they get blasted by some of these winter storms. The most recent, the early January storm, the Weather Channel names the storms. I remember that one. It was called Grayson. It's not a National Weather Service thing. People have their opinions about it. That's not for me to discuss, but some people know it as Winter Storm Grayson, and it caused severe damage here. And it also gave Boston its highest surge water height in history, from what I remember, right? And that could be challenged with this storm. Why? Because the fetch off the ocean is going to just be incredible. Direct onshore flow over hundreds of miles. This doesn't even give you a sense of scale here. If we pull back here on the Google Maps, the wind is going to just scream in off the ocean as the storm comes in from the south. Those strong northeast winds are just going to pile up that water all in this region. I think it makes perfect sense. You see the concave shape overall to the coast here, a very efficient bowl for the water to be piled up within, and therefore we're going to have some big problems. So my plan is to head up to the Boston area today, about a 12-hour drive or so, and then tomorrow night start setting out camera systems, probably 2 systems in Scituate, maybe something in Boston Harbor, and then maybe something up near Newburyport. It's a lot of areas. That's right up here. A lot of area to cover. I'm not really worried about out here this time. Been out there for some blizzards and some incredible storms over the past 3 or 4 years, but this time my emphasis, I think, is going to be focused along this area of the Massachusetts coastline. And the camera systems will feed into our app if you have our Hurricane Impact app, and I'll post the links to that to the feeds as well on Twitter. I want as many people to see this as possible. Don't put everything behind a paywall, so I will post the links to these on Twitter, and might even get the YouTube feed going on our YouTube channel so you can check it out there as well. Being the off season, we don't have as many people involved, helping out, and this is more, like I said, of a sort of a rehearsal period, but I will put the feeds up online, and you can track what's going on. These incredible live cameras that I can put anywhere, and some of this could be pretty dangerous, and I'm not going to be there myself in person to get my vehicle wrecked or get submerged or whatever. I'll be safe and sound. That's what the unmanned cameras are for. Alrighty, so that's the gist of it. I will keep posting updates all along the way. Follow me on Twitter. I am at HurricaneTrack, and you can subscribe on YouTube for future video updates as well. And we'll see what happens. I'll post some of those too along the way. I'll be able to do time lapses from a couple of these cameras as we go along. We're testing some new camera technology. It's going to be a heck of an event, and people need to take it seriously. So please spread the word, share this video, let people know to follow National Weather Service Boston, follow Eric Fisher up there out of Boston at the TV. I think he's WBZ. I hope I got that right. Eric Fisher, some of you already know who that is. He is fantastic. You got to follow the right people. Make sure you understand the impacts for this. That's what it's all about. When it's all said and done, isn't it? What's the impact going to be for me? And there's a lot of good information out there if you know how to look. All right, so that's it from me for now. I'm going to get ready, pack up the vehicle. I'll be renting a vehicle for this. Long story as to why. Basically, we got to get a new hurricane vehicle. The Tahoe is out of commission, but we'll talk about that another time. It's no big deal. It ran its life, 430,000 miles on it, and after the January snowstorm, that was the last time I used it. The engine is no longer functional, and so we're moving ahead with some other plans. We'll talk about that later. So anyway, I'll have more from the road as I head north, and we'll see what happens. Be safe out there and take this seriously, if especially you're in eastern Massachusetts. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again from somewhere along I-95 as I head north today.